So today I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free book review for End of Men by Christina Sweeney Baird. This was a book that I received off of Netgalley, so thank you for that. And I actually have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. I gave it 3 stars. It's definitely more of a 3.5 star book, but it's very rare that I'll come on here and like really have a lot to say about a 3-star book. Usually they're just meh, but this one, I just couldn't place it. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. And a lot of it was like, I really liked this, but I really didn't like this. And this part was confusing, but this part was great. And it was a very emotional book for me. Like, it's so hard to describe how I feel. So it was really hard for me to give it a star rating. So I'm like, part of me thought it was like a 4-star book. Part of me thought it was a 2-star book. And I'm like, what do I do? So you know what I do? I come on here and I give you all of my thoughts and let you decide for yourself if this is a book for you or not. So End of Men is an apocalyptic book, basically. It is a pandemic book. It is literally set in a pandemic, which may make it hit a little close to home. Like for when it came out, like just a little bit. And from what I have heard, the author wrote this before all of the Rona stuff. So like, it's wild. If she did write this before anything happened in 2020, like that's wild because the correlations are so close, y'all. Uncomfortably close. Basically, we start off with this virus that kills men and only men. And we don't know why. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows why it's killing men, but women are carriers. And we start off with, we have this one doctor who kind of discovers it in the ER, but no one will listen to her. Nobody's listening to her. She has tried to call like the health department in her country. I believe she's in Scotland. And no one will listen to her. No one, you're crazy, just stop. And then it spreads worldwide and men are dying. Like babies, men, boys, doesn't matter. If you are a biological male, you are probably 90% likely to die from this virus. And that was just crazy. So that hit me a little hard as a mom to a boy and a wife to a husband. Like that was hard to read because we get a lot of emotion packed into this story, right? Like it's a very sciencey story, but it's also very human and emotional, and it's not a lot of plot. It's very character driven, which could be good or bad depending on who you are, but it is very character driven. And basically the plot of this book is we are going from the very start of this pandemic to literally the very end. We go some years throughout this book, right? And we follow a few main characters, but we get a ton of POVs. Some of these POVs, we get like one small chapter and that's it. We never hear from these people again, which I didn't like. That was one of the things I didn't like because like there was a couple POVs that I thought their stories would have been so interesting, but we like didn't get anything other than like one short chapter. And I'm like, but I want to know what they do next. But we do have like the main characters who I did really enjoy. And especially one who is like a mother to a very young boy and she's struggling with infertility, like secondary infertility, trying to get pregnant with her second child. And that's when this plague hits and it's heartbreaking and devastating following her story. All of the stories are heartbreaking and devastating. Let me be real. There were times reading this where I had to sit it down because I was crying. And normally if a book makes me cry and pull that emotion out of me, I give it 5 stars. But there was just something that didn't, it was all the POVs. I really think it was all the POVs. And normally I love multi-POVs. I think if we would have cut out the inconsequential ones, it would have been better. Because we had so many. And, like, so many of them, like I said, were just, like, one chapter. And to me, that was inconsequential. Like, okay, like, what happens next? Or it's like we get one that's, like, random. This woman is upset because her husband didn't die. Because, like, he's one of the few immune. But he is abusive and just terrible. And she's, bruised. So she murders him. And then she calls for the people to take him away, and they do, and they burn the body because, like, she just says, "Oh, he died of the plague," and that's all we get. Like, that was the whole chapter. Like, I don't even find that be a spoiler. And then we never hear from her again, and then we follow, like, a couple other chapters like that I'm just like, it's inconsequential. But there was a couple really cool POVs. Like, there's this one where we follow this woman who lives a very rural life with her husband and her teenage son. And they have been able to keep quarantined in a way. And then all of a sudden the government is like, okay, you're going to take in all of these boys that we've quarantined and taken from their families. And she's like, what? And they're like, no, you're going to do it. You don't have a choice. So she has to take on these boys. But she's so afraid of her son getting sick and dying that she sends him to live, like, in a barn on the back of the property with no contact for, like, 6 months, right? And we get to see that while she's, like, raising these other teenage boys that, like, are literally there by no fault of their own and trying to protect her son at the same time. Like, y'all, there's so many heartbreaking elements to this book, and I really liked a lot of the different things that we get to see. We get to see, the USA. We get to see, the UK and Scotland and England. And we get to see not a lot in other countries, though. So we didn't really get anything other than, like, the UK and the US. And, like, that one that we got, I believe, was Eastern Europe. The one where the woman killed her husband. Like, but I don't even remember. That's the problem. I believe it would have been Eastern Europe. But a lot. And then we do get some China. We get to see some of the fallouts of what would happen in China if this were to happen, which that part I found very interesting. I found, like, the political aspect of this book super interesting. Like, what happens when all the men die? Because mostly, like, men are in power, right? Like, we have a lot of, like, male figureheads, and in the politics and high up, a lot of men. So what happens when they all die? And we get the ramifications of that. So that was really cool. We get to see how medicine changes, how politics change, how dating changes, how motherhood changes in different places. And we do get some in Australia. Forgot about that. Thinking about, like, how they change motherhood and conception and giving birth, like, they do. There's a section that shows that in Australia, and that was really cool to see how things would change and could change if it was, like, all women running things. Like, it was very, very interesting, right? But there is still just aspects I was like, oh, okay. Like, we didn't touch enough on transgender characters. We had a very small chapter that mentioned trans men and trans women and how this disease affected them differently. But we didn't, I think, get enough exploration of that. We got, like I said, one chapter, which I did find very compelling, but wasn't enough, if that makes sense. We do touch on, how gay men that survived and were immune are now, like, feeling very left out, and how they are really, really struggling, and they are considered a micro minority. So we touch on it a little bit, right? But just not enough, if that makes sense. We definitely touch on, like, the science a little bit of, like, how they come up with a vaccine. But with me not being super knowledgeable in science and, immunology, like, I work in social media marketing. Like, I have a degree in legal studies. Like, I have no idea science, biology. It's not my thing. But part of it, like, didn't really make a whole lot of sense with, like, why men and not women. Like, we kind of find that out, but, like, it didn't make sense to me. But it might make sense to someone that has that kind of background. So, like, Angela, I would like to read this and tell me her thoughts. If you're watching this, Angela, I want to see you read this and tell me your thoughts on the science around it, because, like, you're probably the smartest science-brained person that I know. Not my strong suit at all. Car crashes and legal litigation, social media marketing, writing, that's my jam. Not virology and immunology and things like that. But it didn't make sense to me. And I don't know if that's just because I'm dumb or because it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? But we do, you know, we get to see, you know, getting the vaccine and the distribution of the vaccine and what happens when one country owns the patent on the vaccine and wants to sell it as opposed to give it away. And we follow people in MI6. And it's just, we follow so many characters, y'all. Like, I can't even keep it all together. All in all, though, like, I recommend picking up this book if you think you can handle it. It's a hard one, right? Like, there's some triggers. Obviously, in the times we're living in, reading about a deadly plague that kills 90% of the people it infects is kind of touchy, right? And I feel like as a mother, it was really hard because there is, you know, a trigger for child death. There is lots of death. There's death of parents. There's death of friends. There's death of loved ones, death of husbands, death of children. Like, there's just a lot of dying in this book. And if that bothers you, especially children, I wouldn't pick this up because that part was very hard for me. As a mother, it's very hard for me to read about child death. And it just is. I still read it, and it's in some of my favorite books, but I like to be aware that it's in there so I know what I'm getting into. So if you do try to pick this up, definitely be aware of that. But yeah, it was good. It made me cry a lot. I thought the ending was actually really well done. It was not like a happy ending, but it was a hopeful ending. Right? Like, it's like a very light at the end of the tunnel type ending, especially where it's like, okay, so what happens after like 90% of the men on the earth are dead? What do we do? It's hopeful. It shows that there's a plan, and it shows there was actually some progress in medicine, progress in jobs, progress in a whole bunch of things to benefit women because of this. So it's like a weird silver lining that feels kind of icky but kind of happy at the same time. And yeah, I just really don't know what I feel about this book. I don't know if I enjoyed it, if I hated it, if I loved it, but I kind of like that, right? Like, I kind of like that this book made me think, and it made me sad, and it made me feel things, and it made me ponder what would actually happen, because this is, you know, not a fantasy. It is a sci-fi, but it is a very slice of life, true to life, could really happen, super possible type sci-fi book, I guess. Like, it's a plague book, and it was hard to read, but I recommend it. And if you've read it, I want to hear your thoughts, because this isn't a super popular book. I have not heard a single other person talk about it. I thought it sounded really good before it came out, so I put it on my like most hyped books that I want to read or whatever. And then I got a Netgalley arc, and I was super excited, and I read it, and whoa, it was so much, but I liked it. We're going to end with that. We're going to end with I liked it. I would like to talk to other people that have read it and see what their thoughts are on it. And I want Angela from Literature Science Alliance to read this and then talk to me about it. All right, guys. Well, thank you for hanging out with me. I had a lot of fun, I guess, talking about this book. Not a fun book, but you know what I mean. I always like talking to you guys. So let me know if you plan to pick this up or if you have already picked it up. My name is Jessie, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.